Welcome back to Between the Edits. My name is Grace, and today I have the joy of interviewing Bethany the Bookworm Girl. She is a Bookstagrammer as well as has a major in communications with a minor in professional and technical writing. So I'm really excited to dive into all things books, but also some more fun communications and literacy styled questions here. So Bethany, how are you doing today?
Good. How are you? Thank you so much for having me on. I'm very excited.
Yeah, it's fun to get into it. We were chatting a little bit before starting recording here, and we were already starting to get into some of the fun topics. So I think we're excited and ready to go.
I am definitely very excited.
Awesome. Okay, so one of the first questions I love asking people, which came first for you, a love of reading or a love of writing?
Ooh, it's a tough question. I really struggled learning to read. I gave my mom a little bit of trouble. I'll admit it. And then I kind of would just take picture books and write my own story because I didn't fully understand how to read. So I guess I kind of started writing first, mentally, I guess you could say. And then I learned how to read and I've never stopped. And now my mom is like, she prayed when I was young, like, please God, let her want to read. And now she's like, now I'm praying that you will stop.
That's funny. I've heard that similar, not that quite that story exactly, but similar things of like parents wanting to encourage their children in reading. And so they make them like a deal that like, I'll buy you whatever book you want, or, you know, all that kind of stuff. And then it's like you fall in love with reading and now your parents are like, okay.
Yes, exactly. My mom's like, wow, he really answered that prayer.
There you go. So you also mentioned that you almost kind of started mentally writing. What do you mean by that?
I would say like I mentally write a lot. So for me, I will imagine things a lot in my head, like scenarios or fictional character things versus actually writing on paper. And I count that as writing because I feel like I'm using my imagination and creativity. And I also too think it's a lot of something that kids do when they're young, and kind of to tap into that imagination. So for me, mental writing is I should write more physically, but I do a lot of mental writing, like just imagining different, like, it's kind of silly, but scenarios with fictional characters or just different things like that. And maybe it's a coping mechanism. I don't know.
Yeah, I think we probably do that all a little bit to an extent. Is that something that kind of stayed with you throughout, you know, your childhood and going into young adult? Is that why you wanted to do communications?
Well, actually, I fell into communications by accident. I wanted to do creative writing or English, and then I ended up trying them both and was like, I can't major in this for 4 years. I love it too much, and having to be graded on that was going to, I could tell it was really going to cause a struggle for me. So I ended up just trying a communication class. First day, I knew it was it.
That's really cool. What about it was so special to you?
Well, I really connected with the professor. She was very kind and just very considerate. And the first day we kind of broke down major communication, I guess you would say, terminology. And she talked about how, like, when I'm speaking, I'm sending a message to you, you receive the message and then you decode it and then send a message back to me. And that whole process just fascinated me so much. I think I knew I was going to go into communications and learn how to communicate better. And we communicate in all different means through verbal, nonverbal, and then also through media. And I think I just saw, I guess, the writing on the wall, I guess you could say, that this is kind of my thing. Like, I knew that it was kind of bridging my love of reading and my love of connecting with people and kind of bringing them together, and also kind of at the same time teaching me how to be a better communicator. That's kind of a big answer, but that's sort of, it just kind of happened. And I knew, like, inside myself, like, okay, this is it. This is the major I want to take. And also I would suggest, like, just, this is kind of a sidebar, but if you are going into college, you don't know what you want to do, try different classes, because that's what I did. I tried creative writing, I tried English, I tried criminal justice. I had no clue what I wanted to do. And I tried all three and was like, just wasn't working. And I think when you don't know, experimentation is really, really helpful. Yeah. So that's just kind of a sidebar, but yeah.
No, I think it's super valuable, actually. So my story, when I went into college, I originally wanted to do journalism.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, so I kind of always like, I knew like, I really love reading. I really love writing. I love that style of writing. And so I was like, okay, that's what I want to do. But I also had this really like profound interest in like science.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like super like well developed. It was just more like, I knew that I did well in my science classes in high school and,
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff, and that I had a knack for it, but I didn't like have a drive for it.
Mhm.
But I was like, okay, maybe I should be a science journalist. And so I'd get a
Yeah.
major in journalism and minor in biology.
Mhm.
And then, so I had my very first biology class, very first class of college ever, first year, everything.
Mhm.
That was my very first class.
Oh.
And I sat in there in that first class and I had a very similar experience to you where I was like,
Oh,
oh, okay, this is it.
I
Now,
love
what's
that.
funny is, so I ended up majoring in biology, but what's funny is I don't use that. Like,
Oh my
not
goodness.
really.
I
Like,
love that. Yeah.
I
But
learned a
sometimes
lot
you have
through the
to.
degree process and I know so much about it. And like, it definitely does inform like my worldview and everything. But like,
Mhm.
do I concretely use that degree in my day-to-day life now? The answer is no.
Yeah, it does work like that sometimes. Yeah, and I feel like with communications, I am using it, but I'm also using a lot of skills that I learned working. Like a lot of
Right.
it comes from just working. So yeah, I totally understand what you mean. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
And I
great.
think another thing that I was kind of thinking of as you were talking about the different styles of communication, right? So you mentioned we have verbal, we have nonverbal, and then we have media. Do you
Mhm.
want to break those down just briefly for us so we kind of have a
Yeah,
foundation
yeah,
for that?
sure. I kind of have to like take a minute because, and there's also interpersonal. So this would be considered
Okay.
interpersonal, two people. I believe it's defined as two people. I think it can be three. It's been a while since I've taken my intro to calm. And also if I call it calm, that's just how I phrase it in my head because it's like the shortened version of communication. But anyway, so then there's interpersonal, which is what we're doing. There's nonverbal. So, when I'm talking, I'm giving you cues of I'm enjoying this conversation. I'm moving my hands. I'm making eye contact. I'm smiling. And then also like you can be talking and giving, um, signals of like I'm uncomfortable or I'm angry,
Mhm.
even though you might be talking in a positive way. And then there's verbal, which is what we're doing. And I'm sending you a message by what I'm saying. I find that whole part really interesting. For anyone listening, I really recommend looking up like the communication process. It's very interesting how it breaks down. So I'm sending you a message. I'm the sender, because I'm speaking. And then if you would be speaking, you would be the sender. So right now you're receiving and then you're giving me your nonverbal cues by like nodding.
Right.
So then you're communicating that you're understanding and yeah. Yeah. So then it's a mix of verbal and nonverbal, but it's kind of all
Hmm.
the communication process. And then media, um, we communicate through writing, reading, like what we like. Movies are a great method of communication. Music communicates our
Mm.
feelings and passions. Yeah, yeah. Does that answer your question? I want to make sure I covered
Yes.
it.
Yeah. So the reason why I wanted to ask that is because one of the things I've noticed is that I think I get to be a better communicator when I started reading more seriously.
Oh yeah.
When I
Oh yeah.
started like thinking critically about the books that I was reading, because
Mhm.
when you're writing, you have to create all of those, like specifically the nonverbal cues. I think because
Mhm.
dialogue, there's a whole art to writing dialogue for
Oh
sure
yeah.
in a
Oh yeah.
creative writing setting, but the nonverbal is what builds up so much of the feel behind what somebody is
Mhm.
saying, and so
Mhm.
much context happens there. And so I noticed that when I was thinking critically about the books that I was reading, and then when I was starting to learn how to write in a creative writing aspect there,
Mhm.
I learned a lot more about that nonverbal communication of like what makes sense, what provides, like the
Oh
context of my character
yeah.
saying one thing, but is actually feeling another thing. And then I
Mhm.
started noticing that I was like identifying those things in real life, like in my interactions with other people.
Yeah.
Now, I do want to say that like you can get in trouble doing that too. Like
Yeah.
you can
Yeah.
read into something because you're like, oh, I
That's
read it in a
true.
book like this, and I felt like it was in this.
Yes.
So
Oh
you have to
yeah.
be careful with that. You don't want to
That's
take it too
true.
far. But all of that to say is like we were talking about, is I think that when I started thinking more critically about what I was
Mhm.
reading and how I was writing, I started to notice those things in my real life, and it
Mhm.
changed how I communicated with people.
That's so good. And I think too, reading seriously, it fills you with more critical thinking, like you said. So you're coming into conversations with discernment, wisdom, you can pick up on cues, and then also it gives you a lot more empathy. So when you're connecting with people, it builds authentic connection. And I think that's what I'm very concerned I don't want to like say this as an insult, but like the brain rot culture
Yeah.
and things like that. I'm very concerned because people aren't reading. And I think that's why you're seeing aggressive communication between people. People are getting angry at each other. Like we need to be reading and we need to take it seriously because this is a crisis. I'm not trying to fearmonger, but I really am very passionate about this.
Right, to highlight a trend that is concerning, that everyone should have some amount of concern for.
Yes.
No, I totally get that, and the fact we can jump right into that topic. One of the things that you and I kinda discussed would be nice to bring up, are the declining literacy rates, and so I guess just give us kind of a state of the union on that of where you think maybe where that comes from and the impacts that we're seeing of it.
Yeah, sure. So a little background, I work for a company called Next Area EDU. And we are a nonprofit that helps families navigate homeschooling. So I'm doing a lot of research into the education system and all that type of thing. And I write our blog post on our website. So I've been doing, I have to try and find different topics to write about. And I'm also seeing a lot of stuff on social media about the decline in literacy, the brain rot phenomenon, and then, even like with this whole Wuthering Heights crisis, all this stuff about that. And I'm seeing a lot of stuff that kids are not reading well. Like fourth graders, I can't remember if it's something someone told me or I read it somewhere that fourth graders are not adequately reading, which makes sense because a lot of them would be like the COVID babies. I don't like to label them as that, but that is a crisis. I think we're seeing two things. I think we're seeing kids who are not learning how to read, and then we're also seeing adults who are not reading for pleasure and building intellectualism. I think we're seeing two things. And then I think when the parents stop reading and showing their children the importance of reading, I think then the kids start to break down. And plus, the next generations, all they know is social media and technology. So I'm a big proponent I've talked to homeschooling expert after homeschooling expert that families need to read together because that builds a bond. And then it also shows their child like the positive impacts of reading from a young age.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the idea of families reading together. I think it's a great, like, actionable piece of advice, but that kind of pulls back to a more general principle is like parents need to be modeling the behaviors that they want to instill in their children. It's not enough to say you should go read. Your kids need to see you reading. So I think that's beautiful. I think one of the things that we're struggling with, and you've mentioned a couple times now with the brain rot culture of everything has to be digestible and packageable into the small things that constantly give you dopamine and shorten your attention span, and then you're looking for more of it.
Oh, yeah.
So I think a lot of parents might find that encouraging their children to read, which in today's world, it's a bit of a delayed gratification. Like you have to invest a lot more time into reading and finishing a novel than you would reading a tweet, or whatever it's supposed to be called now. But I can see that being maybe a little bit of an uphill battle for some parents of how do I get my child interested in the delayed gratification of reading a book?
Yeah. I just saw a reel, and this mom was talking about even if you just read 5 minutes, parents are busy. They're sending their kids to school. They're working full time. They're doing sports. They're doing after school activities. I get it. You're busy. But her point was even if you just read 5 minutes a day, that's a game changer. And I think that's an actionable step that most people can fit in. Plus, if you want your kid to sleep better, reading before they go to bed is also very helpful.
Right. Or ideally both, right? Like bookend your days with it. So when you wake up, instead of going straight to the screen, like spend 5 minutes reading, right? Do the same thing at the end of the day. Yeah, I think that's great. We're going to take a quick break from the conversation so I can tell you a little bit about a great product. I want to tell you about the Tertulia for Authors website builder. As someone who made their own website when I first started freelance editing, I can tell you that it took hours of frustration to end up with a website that had half the functionality of the Tertulia for Authors website builder. This resource is specifically designed for authors, whether you're published or not. It's easily customizable, incredibly user-friendly, and puts vital marketing tools at the fingertips of authors, like blogs, event calendars, reader magnets, and email lists. And it's really affordable. So if you're an author looking to establish a website for the first time, or an author who already has a website but is looking to switch to a more manageable software, use the affiliate link in the description to sign up with Tertulia for Authors. Using this link does help support the podcast and is greatly appreciated. Now back to the podcast. How would you say that we've seen that translating into a lack of critical thinking skills? So like once your kids are a bit older, they're going out into the world, they're consuming media, and thinking critically about that in the context for social media nowadays. How is reading kind of like almost, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but like maybe an antidote to some of that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think Again, with the social media, the technology, I think we're seeing a lot of kids who don't really know any different. Like I think past generations, like our grandparents read books, they read the newspaper. This is a sidebar, but I really wish we did something like, had newspapers every day.
Yeah.
I feel that makes me sad that that fell behind, and is sort of in the past. I think it is definitely impacting critical thinking because you're seeing kids, all they know is their phone. They believe what's on their phone, and I am not going to stand in judgment. I have a tendency to doom scroll. And I'm also not a parenting expert either. So I want to preface as those two things, but I think, reading can kind of come into play there and create kids who are individualized. That's what reading really did for me. It really helped me figure out myself and the things that I believe in and the things I enjoy and the things that I'm passionate about. And it's okay if I'm unique in that. And I think it gives you a sense of self. It builds empathy and then critical thinking. It helps you analyze media because okay, I don't really agree with this, but it's a different perspective, which is something that I've really been thinking about a lot lately with communication is, I might not agree with this person's perspective, but why do they feel that way? Like, what is the story behind that? And I think reading can kind of bridge the gap between critical thinking and perspective taking, if that makes sense. I think it can just really help kids understand themselves and have a discernment about the world around them, especially if they're reading books like Little House on the Prairie
Right.
or Nancy Drew. Like you're learning, well, Nancy Drew would definitely give you critical thinking skills. But, I think they're showing you a different way of life that's different from now.
Right.
I'm a big proponent of historical fiction and older books for that reason because it gives you a different perspective.
Right. Another thing that you had mentioned, it made me think about it. There's almost like a built-in stopgap for when you're reading a book, and maybe it has a perspective or something in there that you personally disagree with, right? But because it's a book, it's separate from the internet. You get to read it and you get to form your thoughts on it, and you don't immediately have the option to go make a comment and get mad at somebody, right? Whereas if you're reading like an article online or you're seeing somebody's Instagram post or whatever it is, I think there are some platforms that do better with that and some platforms that are terrible at it. But the idea is you're reading a book and you can disagree with that book and you can think very critically about it and you can come to a conclusion about why you disagree with it specifically.
That's right.
But you don't automatically have that option to go and then get mad at somebody on the internet.
That's
Right.
Yeah.
So it kind of, there's a built-in stopgap there that I think helps build in a sense of, like you said, like discernment, and then maybe just a little bit of I don't know if humility is the right word.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Humility.
Okay, maybe it was that.
And I think it also helps, that stopgap that you were talking about. It helps to stop aggressive communication because that's something else I'm very concerned about. I mean, the things that people say to each other online, like we would never say these things to each other in person. I mean, granted, some people probably would, but most of the time we're bullying online because there's that screen and it almost makes it feel like the relationship isn't real. Like this isn't really happening and this person isn't really a real person. So who cares what I say? And that's a great way to put it. It's a stopgap. And I think it gives you like a deeper perspective. Okay, I don't agree with this person, but why did they write this book? Why did they take the time to write this? And like, where are they coming from that's different from where I come from? And I'm not encouraging people, like if it's against your spirituality, a book you're reading or your core values, I'm not encouraging people to go out and read books like that. But I do think it can be beneficial. I just read a book about the Middle East. It was a poetry book. I didn't agree with everything she said, but it still brought me like, oh, we live in a very big world and there are people with different perspectives, different life experiences, and we don't all have to agree. And I think we're seeing trends on social media as well, like with this aggressive communication and then fighting each other if we don't agree, which I'm concerned with that too.
Right. And then you fall into that little bit of like that tribalism mentality of, let's say that you believe that you disagree with something, right? But if you don't know that much about it, then you don't have a lot of skin in the game, right? And so you're just like, okay, it's like, yeah, I disagree, but doesn't become heated. Whereas nowadays I feel like we're all pit to be in groups against each other, and you have to identify with the group and you have to hold that line. That's your line in the sand. You're planting your flag. Whereas like you were saying that like, reading reading that poetry book or whatever, it was probably beautiful and well written, and you didn't have to agree with anything, but at least you learned a little bit more about the context of that thing. And so it's like,
Yeah.
it's not always that you have to read something that's going to change your mind. It's okay if you read something and it doesn't change your mind,
Yeah.
but at least you're more well informed on the topic, and it's not this highly like intense combative thing of like, no, I'm adamantly opposed to this. It's like, no, I disagree with it, and I know why.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, exactly. And that kind of makes me think of the Wuthering Heights thing that's going on.
And
When I was
for
in
context, we are recording this on Valentine's Day, actually. So this will be released later in May, but at the time of recording, Wuthering Heights is like everywhere right now.
Yes. Yes. I'm glad you said that. I think I read it maybe before I entered high school. So I was like, this book is not like, I didn't even understand the context and the thematic elements that made the book so important. Now that I'm older and have watched all these things online, I'm like, oh yeah, I understand why people are upset about this, because the book is actually made to emphasize toxic relationships, obsession,
Right.
and dark themes that happen within a person when they're obsessed with another person. And now I might not be explaining all this well because it's been a while since I read the book, but I understand why people are heated because I've read this and I know like what you're saying. Like basically, I can say I disagree because I have the background. Yeah.
And it doesn't become something super heated where you saw like a headline on the internet or somebody making an angry Instagram post about it, and suddenly you feel like your righteousness has to match theirs.
Yeah.
It's just, I read the book and I disagree and I know why.
Yeah.
It's not a super heated exchange.
Exactly. Yeah.
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 And I think the other thing too is I was thinking about this as well. So I recently have started, if somebody wants to get me like a gift for like a birthday or a holiday or something like that, and they're asking for suggestions, one of the things I've started giving as an option is like, get me your favorite book, and then I'll read your favorite book, and like I can discuss it and I'll understand you better. And I may not love the book, but so I recently had somebody take me up for it. It was a Christmas gift. They got me their favorite book, and I actually have it right here.
Oh yeah.
Do I? Oh, yes, I do. I Who Have Never Known Men.
Oh, I'm gonna write it down.
So I'll just go ahead and out myself here. I would not say that I'm like a big feminist. Okay. So when I saw this title, I was a little bit concerned. I was like, what am I getting myself into here? But I really wanted to give it a fair shot because I really cared about the person who gifted it to me.
Yeah.
And, if you know anything about the author, you can read it on the back of the book. But basically, she was a child during World War II. Wow. And while she and her family never actually ended up in a concentration camp, according to, I think, what I've read, they did have to flee their home, and they were exposed to all of the horrors of that.
That's right.
And eventually she ends up becoming a psychoanalyst. And so I was like, this is really interesting. Like, I just want to see what it's about. So I read the book, and I think and I loved it, honestly. I never would have picked it out for myself.
Yeah.
I never would have given it a shot. I looked at the cover and I assumed I knew what was going to be in this book, and I was wrong. And I think we take the same thing of like, don't judge a book by its cover. And if you actually read it and you spend time with the book, like it just takes all of that like immediate like emotional out of it. And I don't think we get that on social media. On social media, everything is a cover. Everything is a book cover because you have to condense your meaning into something that fits on social media. So all of social media is judging things by its cover. And so anyway.
Preach. I love it. I love it. Yes. I'm going to have to look that book up. Definitely. I think too, I also am seeing a trend, which it's probably a little bit of clickbait. People know it works, but of storytelling, like for content, which I think is interesting. I think that makes the content a lot more relatable. Now, I do think it is being used as, I guess it could be considered clickbait, but it's being used as a marketing scheme, basically. But I do like that more authentic spin on social media because it does give you a little bit of a glimpse inside the cover, to use the analogy you were using. But yeah, you're right. You're totally right. We're just seeing a cover, and you kind of, how does that build discernment when you're just seeing a cover and you're not getting the full story?
Right. Absolutely. And then we're being trained to only look at the cover. Like if somebody does post something fuller, how many people actually will spend the time to look at it?
Yeah.
As opposed to just seeing the highlight.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So I think we can agree. There's a lot of things about social media that train us intentionally or unintentionally to kind of just miss out on the substance of a lot of situations.
Yes, I totally agree.
Yeah. So, we've talked a lot about that, which I really, really love. I want to take it back to a little bit more of a personal, style to the rest of the interview here. So you also previously told me while you were in college getting your communications degree and you were working on, again, a minor in professional and technical writing, you were actually an author's assistant as well. So tell us a little bit about the experience of being an author's assistant and how that kind of played into what you were learning in college.
Yeah, so I worked for two different authors. Both were No Spice rom-com authors, and I learned so much. It's crazy. Now doing the job that I'm doing, how much of that stuff that I learned is helping me. I mean, I learned how to use Canva and kind of get
Love
into
Canva.
I know. So it's such a blessing. And I learned how to do like nitty gritty little tweaks with it that I never would have probably learned on my own. And, I learned how to do reels. And now some of that I did sort of teach myself with my Bookstagram. But then I also learned how to like figure out what content works and what doesn't and kind of follow trends to see what picks up and what doesn't. And I did get to apply my degree because I did write a lot of emails. I did some Facebook group things, which that was really fun. And now I'm doing that today with my current job. So it all kind of just sort of flowed right over, and it was a great experience. If anyone is interested in that, I would highly suggest it. It's great. It's a great job experience. And it also really got me well versed in the author world, especially because eventually I would like to write my own book. So it gave me sort of that behind the scenes picture of what that looks like.
Right. And just how much work it takes. Like, it's not just writing the book. It's like
Oh,
you have
no.
to be your own marketing team.
Oh,
So
yeah. Yeah.
lots of authors need support in doing that. And so, like you said, if anyone's interested in being an author's assistant, there's definitely room out there for that. So it sounds like you were doing a lot of social media marketing for them, responding to email correspondence. What would you say are like the main 3 or 4 tasks that someone should expect being an author's assistant, with the caveat, of course, that it might vary from author to author?
Yeah. I would say making content as far as making Instagram posts, doing announcement posts, doing reels. I'm trying to think of all the other things that I did, and also using different apps. So TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. And I did some things with Facebook announcements, Facebook groups. And I did a lot of like ARC reading tasks as well, which was really fun. Like, I would take a Google form and then take all the people who had signed up for the ARC and then go through and see which ones would fit and which ones would be a good match. That was really fun. I really enjoyed that. And yeah, and I think it's also like you can really expect to get well versed in the Bookstagram world. I feel like I made more connections with the jobs that I had and with readers and with authors. Actually, the one job I had started, and then the second author that I worked for had reached out to the first one and said, "Hey, do you know of anyone?" So it was a referral, basically. So it really does. It's a great networking thing too.
Absolutely. So then when did you start your Bookstagram in relation to, were you an author's assistant first and then created your Bookstagram, or was that, just walk me through the timeline of your Bookstagram.
Yeah, I believe I started in 2021 with my Bookstagram. So that was first. And then I sort of happened upon the job with the first author, just sort of fell into place. And then the referral happened with the next author. That might have been 6 months later, I think. So I would have had my Bookstagram for probably, I'm blanking because I think it was about maybe 3 or 4 years until the first job happened. Yeah. Yeah.
Very cool. Okay. And so then one of the things that I also love asking on here, you are a faith informed, right? So you're a Christian, you're very into the no spice, all
Yeah.
that kind of stuff, which I mean, I personally agree with. I think that's great.
Thank you.
How does your faith inform how you approach both communications and your
Yeah.
Bookstagram? Obviously, your Bookstagram is communications, but from a career standpoint as well as from your Bookstagram.
Yeah, I love that question. I would say, I sort of had a spiritual awakening. I'm tearing up. I had a spiritual awakening in like 2020. It was very challenging. I mean, it was challenging for everyone that time, but I just sort of had like a reconnection with God. I've been a Christian since I was 4 years old. And then this happened, and then I started my Bookstagram, and I had some experiences in high school with finding books that were spicy, and it scarred me.
Yeah.
It was
Mhm.
very troubling. Um,
Mhm.
and then I kind of just I got on Bookstagram and was like, oh, wow, like there's such a big world to Christian fiction and no spice.
Mhm.
And then started seeing these trends of spicy books and then promoting spice in YA along with other themes that I
Right.
disagree with. And I think it informs my reading because I try to put God at the center. I won't say I'm perfect at that. I'm definitely not. I mean, I think a daily choice and it's hard. Um,
Mhm.
but I think with having my faith, it like, I have connected with God on a deeper level through the books that he has put in my life.
Mhm.
There have been books that I read, that I've read them and thought, "Wow, he knows. He knows the things that I struggle with, my heart, my passions." And, things like this opportunity to come on and speak with you, I feel like he uses that love of books and connects the two, my faith and my love of books.
Mhm.
Because he does care about the things that we love. Yeah. To answer your question about my faith informing my reading, I feel like, I just want to cover that a little bit more. I think it helps me kind of have discernment
Mhm.
and, the things that I'm reading. Is this something that I feel is right for my spiritual walk? And
Mhm.
I honestly think um, that kind of depends on the person. I think we all kind of have our area of things that we shouldn't read. I mean,
Right.
there are some things that like I have friends who love and I couldn't pick that up because it would be like too scary for me or something like that.
Mhm.
So I think it grounds me more in my values, I guess, to answer your question. Yeah.
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 No, I absolutely love that, and I mean, I can relate to you a lot as well of, I picked up reading, we loved it when we were little,
Yeah.
right? And,
Mhm.
I remember one of my favorite books is Aragon, and that's because it was a book that my mom read to my sister and I when we were little before
Oh,
bed,
I
right?
love
But
that.
then in around, like, elementary school age or whatever, like, learning to read and all that kinda stuff at the younger years before, like, probably high school, didn't really get that much into reading. I remember there was one time, I think I was probably in middle school, I was waiting for the bus, and I read
Mm.
Marley and Me,
Oh, yeah.
and I remember, like, not being that pulled by the book, but I was finishing it, and then I
Mhm.
remember finishing reading it as I was waiting for the bus one morning, and I was just sobbing finishing this book,
Oh,
and I
oh,
was like, "Wow, okay," but then still, for whatever reason, I didn't, like, latch on to reading after that.
yeah.
It wasn't until I read, what was it? The Mortal Instruments series by
Oh,
Cassandra
yeah.
Clare,
Yeah.
and my sister had read it first, and she talked about how much she loved it, so I was like, "Okay, I'll give it a shot," and I
Yeah.
was like, wow. you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So anyway, I could take you along all the landmark books, right? But it
Yeah.
wasn't until
Yeah.
later in life for me. But as I was getting into that, it's like suddenly now that there are like ebooks and Kindles and I can get Kindle Unlimited and I can download books on my
Mhm.
phone and
Mhm.
my parents aren't seeing what I'm reading and I'm starting to find this really scary content that I like didn't know what to do with. And so I could totally relate to at a young and uninformed age being exposed to that kind of content just because
Yeah.
the industry moved so fast and
Yes.
all that kind of stuff. And we shifted from books that have spice being marketed for that. It
Yeah.
used to be that you understood the way that a book was marketed, what kind of content was in it, right?
Mhm.
And that's not always the case, but that was by and large, right? There was a
Yes.
general understanding of how these books were marketed. And now
Yes.
it's almost the opposite, where you have to market your book especially to be identifiable as no spice.
Oh, yes. Mhm.
Yeah, and so we're seeing a
Yeah.
shift in that. And so I had a similar experience to you, and I really felt when I started really showing up in my faith, I became a Christian much later in life compared to you. It was actually probably just like 6 or 7 years ago at this point.
Wow, that's wonderful.
And, I after becoming a Christian, I, like, really and it wasn't something where it was like in the beginning, it was definitely like, I feel that I should not be reading these things. Okay. But that still felt like a struggling choice that I had to make. Whereas after a certain time, I just naturally became less and less interested in it, and I
Mhm.
can't give any credit to that except to God. I
Yeah.
just, like, because I struggled with it
Mm.
until I didn't, and then I was like,
Yeah.
"That can only be God."
That's right. And I think too,
Mhm.
um, again, it's that perspective taking. I think a lot of people might see my content and think that I'm judgmental, and I never want to come from a place from that because, like you were saying, it is a struggle too. I know people who have really struggled with giving it up and walking through that. And I honestly, I really feel for people because, yeah, I never want to
Mhm.
come from a place of judgment. I just want to offer other options because there is a way out.
Right.
And, yeah, I just wanted to speak to that. Yeah, because I think that's important.
Absolutely. Well, and I think a lot of people like find a book that you really, really love and it
Mhm,
has a certain element in it, whether it be spice or something else that you're just
mhm,
like, I can't in good
mhm.
conscience like expose
Yes.
myself to that or I don't want to.
Mhm.
But you really, really love that book for a specific element. It's really powerful to give somebody else a book that has what they're
Yes.
looking for, that what they're
Mhm,
looking for, that doesn't have those elements in it, right?
mhm,
So if you're looking
mhm.
for like a big epic fantasy, but you
Yes.
don't want it to have all the spice, there are books out there, I promise, that
That's
can
right.
give you that same feel, and you realize you don't miss it the way that
That's
you thought you would.
Yes, I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really
That's
glad you
exposure
said that.
for sure.
Yes, yes.
And then on the other front, I think one of the things I can also relate to is I also felt like it was God that was moving me towards I used to only ever read fiction, and it
Mm,
was very much like an escapism thing, but too
mhm.
far. Like,
Yeah.
I would be, like, in college, like, super busy,
Yes.
not reading at all, and then we'd have a break. And
Mm,
so, like, my winter break or my fall break, I'd just, like, binge read, and I
yeah.
was like, "This isn't healthy."
Yes.
Uh,
That I
and
totally get
so
that. Yeah.
Right, and so I feel like it was also after I became a Christian that I was like, I have a responsibility to make sure that I'm reading in a way that is good for me,
Mhm. Yes.
and so I really challenged myself to read one fiction book and then read a nonfiction book, and I
Oh,
realized
that's
that, like,
good.
my appetite's kind of evened out, and now I look
Mhm.
forward to reading nonfiction books as well as fiction books, but I'm not,
That's
like,
wonderful.
binging my way through them anymore.
That's great. I love that. Yeah, and I think too, I like how you use that word responsibility because I think that's what comes into play when you read for I guess I'll say enlightenment, but also pleasure. I think it's
Mhm,
responsibility to educate yourself on whatever topic and then also have responsibility like what are my boundaries? What am I comfortable with?
mhm.
And I think that's very important. And I especially think like when we're seeing this trend of declining literacy rates, I just think there's a responsibility that we all need to take to read and
Mhm.
educate our minds and, respect our boundaries, even if they might be different from somebody else's. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
It makes me think I interviewed a, counselor recently who uses art in her counseling, in her therapy,
Oh,
and she's also a Christian, faith informed, and she talks about how people need creative rest and they don't realize it. And
that's so
there's also like
good.
this pervading sense of perfectionism where they sit down
Mm.
and they're not open to the act of creating art because they're
Mhm.
worried that it's not going to be valuable enough, that it's not going to be good enough, and that
Mm.
there's no point in them even trying. And so part of her biggest struggle is just getting people to get past that initial hurdle of being a perfectionist.
Yes.
But then once you get there, she reminds people it's like God delights in our creativity, right? And we can
I
take
love
that
that.
to extremes, but he made us creative people because
That's
we
so
we
good.
should not be afraid of creativity and of art and pursuing those things.
Yes.
Um, and there's joy in that process.
Yes. I
But
love that.
anything taken to an extreme can be dangerous.
Yes. I love yeah,
Mhm.
that's so important. Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing. Um, so you kind of already have touched on it a little bit, but we'll wrap up with these final two questions here. Um, the second to last question, I always love asking this one. How has your journey with your Bookstagram or with your communications degree changed your perspective on other aspects of your life?
Oh, that's good. I really like that. I would say it's really helped me, well, one, build empathy and critical
Mhm,
thinking, which we already kind of discussed that. I also think it's helped me see the world in a different way. Like everybody has their story and their story is
mhm,
important. And I also think I don't know, it sort of makes you see the world as a bigger place and that, my story, even though I'm living in my head and I'm only seeing things from my perspective, I think it kind of makes you acknowledge the fact that there are other people's stories happening around you.
mm,
Um, and I also think reading and communications kind of helped me really tap into myself and build confidence in myself. My interests might be unique. In high school, I really struggled with feeling like nerdy and geeky and weird for being a fangirl and loving fictional
mm,
characters and reading so much. I felt sort of like an outsider and I learned how to and that wasn't really because of anyone else. It was just something I struggled with personally. And I think I learned how to kind of embrace myself through first it was reading, and then Bookstagram really helped me with that as well. Cause I was like, oh, there are other people who are like me. And then also I think it's the communications part really helped me learn how to speak and learn how to communicate and build confidence in the things that I enjoy. Um, yeah. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great.
It also made me think about when you were talking about how it changed your perspective on just operating in the world, and that you're seeing that everybody else around you has their own story.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it's kind of like the other side of the coin to like the main character
Yes.
syndrome that people
Yes.
talk about, where it's like
Yes.
romanticize your life. You're the main character
Yes.
of your story.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like a lot of things, there started off with like a kernel of truth and goodness to that of
Mm-hmm.
like, you should, kind of not romanticize your life, but
Yeah.
as a way to address having a positive outlook, I think is
Yes.
probably the kernel of that. If you're
Yes.
looking for things to go
Mhm.
wrong, things will go wrong. If you change your
Yeah.
mindset and you have a more positive outlook on your life,
Mm.
you'll notice more things going well, and you can be more forward when your joy and your
Yeah,
gratitude.
exactly. Yeah.
So that's kind of like the root of, I feel like, what main character syndrome was trying to
Mm-hmm.
address. But
Mm-hmm.
then again, like we were talking about earlier, you take it to an extreme where suddenly
Yes.
everybody else is an NPC around you.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what you're talking about is it kind of gave you the opportunity to step back and be like, wait a second, I'm reading books about other people's lives.
Mhm.
People have their own experiences. This
Yeah.
whole world is not just about me living my life. Is
Yeah.
that a fair characterization?
Yeah, and it is, and I think too, um, kind of segueing a little bit, it also made me feel not alone. I joined Bookstagram and made all these friends and connections and really made me feel like, oh, other people are like me. They don't want to read spice and they have Christian values and there are people that I can connect with on an authentic level. And as far as reading itself, I had never heard of Jamie Jo Wright until I really joined the Bookstagram community and everybody was raving about her. Like, you really need to read her. I was like, okay, I'll give it a shot. Like, I was nervous because I know her books are suspenseful and can be kind of
Mm,
scary. So I wasn't sure how that would work with the Christian fiction perspective.
mhm.
And I tried her book, her first one that I had ever tried. It was The Vanishing at Castle Moreau. And I remember like I was working on finishing it and I was sitting in bed and bawling my eyes out because I identified so much with the main character. Like finally I felt represented. And what's crazy is I actually couple months ago ended up interviewing Jamie for my job because she
Oh.
is a former homeschooler and is now homeschooling her kids. So that was really cool. It came full circle. But I think reading it gives you that, oh, there are other people with other stories, but then it also shows you those other people with other stories can also identify with my story and I'm not
Mm.
alone.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Thank you.
Oh, I love that. Okay.
Thank you.
That's a perfect place to wrap that up. So we'll transition into my favorite last question, which sometimes is arguably the hardest question. I say hopefully jokingly. Um, 2 to 3 book recommendations. So as a bookstagrammer, I'm sure you've got lots of things floating
Oh, yeah.
around, but
Yeah.
the reason why it's so difficult is because just 2 or 3 for our listeners that you kind of want to give a shout out to.
Yeah, sure. The first one is The Unwrapping of Communication, I believe, by Kevin T. Jones. I might be saying the title wrong, but I know the author name is correct.
Mhm.
I read that for a communication class, changed my entire worldview. It does have a Christian focus, but it really is. He talks a lot about how we can work on these communication things, but we're never going to be perfect, and that's okay. Like it's always going to be a work in progress, and I think that's really important. And then, I would say the Ragamuffin Gospel also changed how I view Jesus's love. It's completely unconditional, and that book, yeah, again, I cried reading that one. And then I already mentioned The Vanishing of Castle Moreau. That is a favorite, but I'm going to go with the third one if that's okay.
Yeah, go for it.
I would say for something light and fun is, I believe I have to look at my shelf. Yeah. The first book is The Hearse and Buggy. It's a mystery series. It's so much fun. There's no spice. And it's, by Laura Bradford. Yeah. And it's so much fun. It's a like cozy mystery series set in a fictional town in Pennsylvania. You get immersed in Amish culture. It's really fun. It's very Hallmarky, but not on like I don't want to diss Hallmark at all. Like that's not my
Oh,
intention. But like it's not cheesy at all. It's very
right.
like warm-hearted, fun, and really touches on like the Amish culture, which is very interesting. And then you get to see how the main character interacts with some really hard life situations. So
Mhm.
it's really good.
Yeah. I feel you so much about, like, Hallmark has become, like, the easy, like, throwaway term for something that's kind of just, like I don't
Yeah.
know if vapid is a fair word, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, just a little bit surface level, where
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
the origin of Hallmark was always what you're talking about, which is, like, these really, like, touching, sentimental,
Yes.
lighthearted kind of
Yes.
stories where it's like there's still substance to them, but it's a
Yes.
specific type.
Yes.
And then it kind of got away with it, and
Yeah, and I
now
don't like to
there's
use that term, but I don't, I know everybody will know what I mean. Uh,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's an identifier for sure, but
yeah.
no hate to Hallmark, we love a good
That's
Hallmark
right.
movie.
That's right. That's right. Totally.
Awesome. Alrighty. Well, those sound like great additions to the list. We'll make sure that we get them on there
Great.
for our season 2 reading list recap. So that'll be a great
Wonderful.
addition
That's
there.
great.
Where can people connect with you? Whether it be with NextEra EDU or where your Bookstagram, where can people find you?
Yeah, so my Bookstagram is at the Bookworm Girl Bethany. I have to remember, make sure I'm saying it right. And then I'm just on Instagram, so you can find me there. And then as far as my job, you can look up I believe it's www.nxteraedu.com. You can find us on social media, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. We're all on, and YouTube and Spotify. That's where we post our podcast. Yeah, check us out. If you are interested in homeschooling, I'm gonna do a little shameless plug.
I love it. Yeah, I think there's going to be lots of people. And even if, just like you were talking about at the beginning, like if somebody just wants to start reading with their kid and wants resources for that
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
stuff.
definitely check
I'm
out our
sure.
YouTube and Spotify. We talk a lot about that. That's a great place
Amazing.
to start.
Awesome. Well, Bethany, this has been so fun. I thank you so much for your
Thank you.
time and coming on
Thank
here.
you.
I think that you brought a lot of cool perspective to looking at
Thank
the
you.
world from a communication lens. And I
Thank
think how
you.
that can be really, really helpful for people. And your faith is so touching. And so thank you
Thank
for
you.
speaking very personally about that. That's all I have for us today. Thank you so much
Thank
for your
you.
time.
Oh my gosh, thanks so much for having me on. This was so much fun. I love talking about all this stuff, and I'm really honored to be on here. It's very fun.
Amazing. All righty.